odd number of commissioners seemed appropriate. And 5 seemed to be a more efficient size than 7 or 9 or 11. But there's no magic to that, and we don't profess that there is. In terms of the process of selection, the initiative is silent about that. And our anticipation is that the legislature, assuming this passes, and I believe if it goes on the ballot, it will pass, we would expect that the legislature and the legislative leadership would then establish a process to solicit applications from across the state. We don't want to limit it to people from any particular geographical area. The only requirements that we have stated in the petition is that the members can't be a lobbyist for 5 years, can't this, can't that. We have a line in there about having some reputation in the community for integrity and appreciation of ethical principles. But we would expect the legislature, in implementing the bill, to establish an invitation process and a collection of names process that would be broad-based and that would be fair and that would give anyone who is interested an opportunity to be considered for inclusion within that group of 20 upon which the legislative leadership would be asked to agree. And I should point out, because I didn't earlier, that we also provided a plan B in the event that there is no legislator unanimity about a group of 20. And in that event, we have provided that the first 5 sponsors on the initiative petition would form together and would go through the same kind of process with an invitation, with a random selection, the same way the legislative leadership would proceed to determine who the 5 members of the commission would be. The only reason we provided that was because we felt that it would be helpful, and we are believers in compromise, and we believe that the legislative process is a process of compromise. But if that compromise isn't possible, then we felt it was important to have an alternative arrangement provided so that the commission and the task which will be given to it by the public could not be stymied by an agreement among legislators to not make the selection.
Pat, you had a question, you were next?
Yes, I'm Pat Klein, I'm a citizen from St. George. My question is, when this comes to an actual vote, who is voting, the legislature or will go on a citizen's ballot?
This is an initiative bill, and so when the required number of signatures are gathered and verified, it then goes on the general election ballot in 2010 in November, and the registered voters of the state of Utah then have an opportunity to say yes or no.
Obviously, I didn't go into enough detail and explain the signatures, right? Sorry. Sir.
Kay Brinkerhoff, St. George, retired citizen. A question about the ethics committee. If they find a wrongdoing, if I understand you correctly, they would write up the wrongdoing from the committee, submit that to our state legislator leaders for any kind of corrective action. Is that correct statement?
That's correct. And the reason we do that, and the reason this is an advisory commission, is that under the Utah Constitution, Article 6, Section 10, the legislature, the House and the Senate, have a constitutional responsibility to judge the qualifications and, what's the other phrase? I can't remember off the top of my head. And conduct of the members of the House or the Senate, and may impose disciplinary action to include by a 2/3 vote a determination of expulsion. And so we felt that to preserve that constitutional prerogative, we could only make this commission advisory. And then whatever happens is a matter for the House or the Senate to determine. And when we believe that is the procedure, that the state constitution requires. But that doesn't preclude the people from prescribing a code of conduct and the way in which that code of conduct should be implemented.
It just seems to me then we were establishing an advisory committee with no teeth. If we submit it to the legislature leaders, and we know we're a one-party state, isn't that not like putting a fox in charge of the hen house?
Well, I appreciate the concern, and it's one that we have spent a lot of time thinking about. But we don't believe we have an alternative under our Constitution than the way that we have proceeded. However, we don't think this is a toothless remedy because all of this is a public record. All of these proceedings are conducted within an open public meeting. We anticipate that they would be covered by the media, and we would imagine that a recommendation from the commission that legislator X be considered for some sanction because of conduct Y would receive some wide public attention. And then it would be up to the legislature, up to individual legislators to explain, A, why no action was taken, or B, and this is provided in the bill, if the legislature then proceeds to act on a recommendation from the commission, all of the legislative proceedings dealing with any kind of action on that recommendation have to be in public, I mean, they have to be in an open meeting, and there has to be a vote taken that is recorded by yeas and nays. So we're trying to provide a measure of accountability, and that may not be the best remedy in the world, but it, we think, is the only one that is reasonably available to us.
Follow-up question. Why do you think our legislators don't like this idea and they don't do it themselves?
Well, I have my own opinion. If there are legislators here, they
We
can
have
certainly
legislators
express
here.
theirs.
Got three.
Is this a reasonable proposal in your mind? Are we on the wrong track? Or what's your feeling as a legislator?
It's not reasonable and they're on their own track.
For what reason?
How long do you want to stay here?
Well, I would just like a response from our elected officials. If you don't like sunshine, why are you running?
Is that an open invitation?
If you have Brad, do you have a brief response to that?
No,
Or
I
would you
don't.
like to add some comment in a future opportunity here?
Well, I don't have a brief response to that, but I certainly have a response.
We can allocate a couple of minutes and come back after everyone has had an opportunity to express themselves, then we can take more time. So I'll take an initial couple of minutes and we can come back if there are no other questions.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Please.
The first thing I want to say is, I mean, you're hearing one side of the presentation here. And while they would suggest that there's no constitutional issues with this, I think what you're going to find as we move along is that there are serious constitutional issues with this. And it primarily relates to the fact, at least one of the issues, is that the legislature, by Constitution, has a responsibility to police itself, to police our members. And I guess one of the things I would like to ask you is, do you have a problem with your local elected officials? Are you aware of ethical problems with your local officials?
I am aware of that. Once many of our elected officials get in office, they forget the people that
That
put
wasn't
them
my
there.
question. Do you have an issue with any of your current locally elected officials?
No, but if with this, I wouldn't have that question either.
Well, okay.
But do you, as a legislator, why are you afraid to have an oversight of the reforms? And why hasn't the legislature policed itself? You said we're self-policing. That obviously is not happening.
Okay, well, I beg to differ, and I think a lot of what you're hearing about ethical violations and things like that are things to have an issue